Sometimes the most shocking corporate misconduct is hidden in plain sight, invisible to the naked eye.
What is happening here will swallow our world if we don't stop it right here, right now.
Looking back, there was an early clue that the world's richest man was up to something here.
It's just like, why is Elon Musk coming to Memphis?
So as I've become older, I've become much more sensitive to foreign ops infiltrating the United States of America, how they signal boost creators within the United States of America who are just dumb idiots who don't realize they're actually serving the interests of a foreign power. And a perfect example of this phenomenon is this irrational hysteria related to data centers that is sweeping the nation in the United States of America. And a perfect example of how crazy and quickly these campaigns have spread across social media and into the real world is the fact that according to recent polling, more people are in favor of having nuclear power plants in their area than they are in favor of having data centers. Now, again, nuclear power is another thing that there was a historic propaganda op against, which is one of the reasons why we don't have clean, cheap nuclear energy proliferating across the country. But the idea that those decades of propaganda against nuclear energy can be overwhelmed with a couple of years of more perfect union videos and all this other bits of left-wing propaganda, and by the way, right-wing slop populist propaganda, is absolutely astounding. And again, it just goes to show us how absolutely this is being prioritized by the enemies of the United States of America. Because make no mistake about it, the Chinese and all these different foreign agencies that are boosting these campaigns, promoting the hysteria, putting out all these lies related to AI data centers, they're not stopping in their own country from building them. In fact, what they're trying to do is hamstring and kneecap the United States of America so that they could lead the way in the 21st century. And the fact that so many Americans have bought into this and believe every single stupid ass thing that they see posted online is incredibly annoying and frustrating. And by the way, if you actually get what you want, and according to Polymarket, a lot of Americans are on the cusp of doing that because a data center moratorium seems to be waiting in the wings in the future, if not in this administration, definitely in the next Democratic administration, you'll essentially cripple the economy, and these same exact people will act like they had no idea how this possibly could have happened. And for a lot of them who are just idiots repeating things that they hear from other people that doesn't even make any sense and isn't even actually related to data centers, they actually won't know what happened, but I'm sure they'll come up with other conspiracy theories in order to explain that, and it's absolutely embarrassing. But before we get into all the fake things that you're hearing about data centers, we should probably talk about your own personal data, because yes, it's being collected, and today's sponsor, Incogni, is actually meant to address those real issues. Have you ever heard the phrase that if something's free, you're the product? Well, I think that needs to be revised for our current situation, because it turns out, free or not, you are always the product. And this is because there are companies called data brokers that make money by collecting, repackaging, and selling your private personal data, including your full name, your personal telephone number, your personal email address, your actual address, and your social security number. However, there is good news, which is if you don't want your information collected by these companies, all you have to do is actually request the removal of that information, and they are legally obligated to do so. But the thing is, there are so many of these companies that it's basically impossible for you to do it on your own, or at least it was impossible before today's sponsor, Incogni. You see, what Incogni does is allow you to authorize them to act on your behalf, to go look around the internet and find your private personal information and then take it down upon your request. And this will save you a ridiculous amount of hours. If we go to my own personal Incogni page, what you'll find out is that I have over 1,100 completed requests, and this would have taken me on my own nearly 860 hours in order to do so. Again, something that was impossible, now eminently doable, thanks to our buddies over at Incogni. But what if you want your information removed from a specific website and you don't know when Incogni is going to get to requesting it removed? Well, if you get one of their unlimited plans with their family or individual, you can actually drop the link into their custom removal tool, and guess what? It gets gone really quickly. And my personal preference, by the way, is the family unlimited plan. That's the one I have and use because it's not just about protecting me, it's about protecting the ones that I care about. But whatever plan you choose, if you go to incogni.com incogniAd.com/AJW and use promo code AJW, you can enjoy 60% off. Secure your private information and get a wonderful discount. That's incogni.com/AJW, incogni.com/AJW.
Just have to come on here and say this real quick about the data centers. If you think that the government and big tech are building these billion-dollar facilities in the middle of nowhere to store your family photos or help you in any capacity, you're retarded. Okay? You're retarded.
So this is a creator called Isabella Maria DeLuca, and personally, I got nothing against the girl. In fact, you might remember her from one of the stupidest non-controversies to ever exist on the internet.com, where people said that she was wearing too tight of a gray t-shirt while posting a baking video, and supposedly that was because she was trying to lure in the simps or something of the sort, and honestly, it was embarrassing, and everybody who jumped on that campaign was also embarrassing, especially since after hearing Isabella Maria DeLuca talk about data centers in such an incoherent, stupid, and baseless way, I wish you would go back to baking. Unironically, woman needs to go back to the kitchen because this woman thinks she's saying something so profound and so amazing when she gets every basic fact wrong and again is producing very basic slop content. But let us hear her out. Let us hear her dumbass argument because maybe, just maybe, she is going to blow us away with her intellect.
Just have to come on here and say this real quick about the data centers. If you think that the government and big tech are building these billion-dollar facilities in the middle of nowhere to store your family photos.
So one of the problems with populist slop content like this is that they can never actually address the issue. They can never actually make an argument. And again, it might sound like, oh my God, she's really seeing through the matrix, when in reality, she is in fact, as she described it, the people who think that data centers are related to family photos.
Retarded.
So nobody has ever made the argument that the reason they're building these massive data centers, the reason the big 7 tech companies are essentially leading the entire S&P 500 in growth is due to the fact that they're going to store your family photos. Nobody's ever said that. Nobody's ever made that case. That is not an argument that was ever put forward. It doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever. So again, Isabella Maria DeLuca, what the hell are you even talking about?
To store your family photos?
So look, I understand that data centers may be a little bit complicated. It's tech related, and not all of us are experts in scientism, but luckily for you guys out there in the audience, I am a level 47 Scientologist, so I'm going to explain this in a way that you can understand based on my genius level understanding, which I will be presenting as a rudimentary level understanding to all of you guys. So essentially, data centers are meant to power the AI revolution, and what we ended up discovering with AI is that you could essentially get it to do more things if you have more units of computing power in order to back up this process. So you could teach AI to do more if you have more units of computing power. So 1 unit of computing power ends up leading to 1 unit of AI learning, and a million billion jillion units of computing power ends up leading to a million billion jillion units of AI learning. Okay, you got it. I know I'm making this very oversimplified, but this is so you can understand what we're actually talking about. So what these AI data centers are actually doing is building up the computing capacity in order to advance AI even faster. Essentially, we're trying to brute force it. And again, the United States of America and big tech in the United States of America are not only competing with one another, but we're also competing with foreign governments that are also building out these data centers. And very conveniently, all those third worldist slop accounts are posting and reposting things from More Perfect Union and content being put forward from people like Isabella Maria DeLuca that happens to be against this. So yeah, that is the purpose of data centers. It has nothing to do with family photos. Nobody has ever said it has anything to do with family photos. And I know it might sound scary and confusing because it's data centers and big tech can't name anything. They should probably name them happy centers. And then Isabella Maria DeLuca would be like, well, I like being happy, so I would support that. But instead, we get this slop content and she ends up progressing it even further, which again goes to show us how much she's projecting in her hypothesis related to this subject matter.
They're calling them data centers because calling them mass surveillance centers would probably send people into a spiral. They're literally building the infrastructure for a surveillance state, and they're doing it right in front of your face. It's going to be fully capable of monitoring your speech, your behavior, your purchases. It's going to essentially harvest your biometrics and create an entire digital profile for you.
Yeah, this is the level that we're operating at right here with this sloppulous content. So needless to say, it actually does not take, in comparison, this level of computing power in order to do mass surveillance. In addition to that, while mass surveillance could be profitable for government contractors, while again, companies do profit off of your data because they can use that to actually make profiles of you in order to better target advertise to you, the idea that the S&P 500 is currently being carried by 7 giant companies right now at this moment who are all in the business of surveilling you with no particular endgame, monitoring your free speech, again, with no particular endgame, makes no sense at all whatsoever, and again, is patently absurd and ridiculous. But remember, what Isabella is doing right here is producing slop content to try to cash in on the hatred of AI data centers, so her explanation doesn't need to make any sense. And by the way, the government, which already has their own data centers and their own surveillance apparatus, is already surveilling you. Yes, that's a problem. Yes, we should address that. Yes, we should go after that. But the data center that she's specifically highlighting right here is a private data center. In fact, most of them are private data centers. And she's going to go on to talk about power and water usage and all these other things that are not connected, but she's going to try to connect them to mass surveillance as if this makes any sense other than the fact that it's meant to get you angry and irrationally angry at data centers and thus convince you that it's good to kill off America's advantage in the economy of the 21st century to the benefit of the Chinese, who, by the way, have a much more sophisticated and stringent mass surveillance system than we have in the United States of America because, you know, they don't have civil liberties over there like we have in the United States of America.
Speech, your behavior, your purchases, it's going to essentially harvest your biometrics and create an entire digital profile for you.
Also, I will point out that even though this is presented like, oh, I'm just in my car, I'm giving you my opinion after I came back from a walk or going to the gym or whatever this is supposed to be, it actually seems like she's reading. If you actually track her eyes, again, eyes up there, people, show some respect, be a man, stop simping, that yeah, she seems to be reading a script, which is not surprising because Isabella DeLuca, like many other influencers, has been exposed for being a part of campaigns run through places like Influenceable by my friend Tony at Current Revolt, the Texas paper of record, which you should definitely check out, as he's written extensively about these political influence campaigns that very often are actually undisclosed to the person who's watching it. So what you might be seeing right here is an advertisement from an organization with nefarious intent, and she's just regurgitating those talking points. Or again, she could just be not that smart.
People are trying to say that something like this would never happen. There's a 92% chance on Polymarket that something like this is prohibited. Utah just got approved for a massive data center blueprint. This data center in Utah is going to be 63 square miles. Do you guys know how massive that is? I'm talking almost 3 times the size of Manhattan and 200 times the size of the NSA's data center that already exists in Utah. Why does Utah need a 63 square mile data center?
So again, this is all low IQ conspiracy nonsense put forward by people who are either unwittingly or wittingly supporting the enemies of the United States of America. And you could tell by these repeated talking points, and a perfect example of this is the size of this Utah data center, because you just heard Isabella Maria DeLuca say that this data center is going to be 3 times the size of Manhattan. 3 times the size of Manhattan for servers, and why do they even need that when the NSA already has their own data center in Utah? Well, first of all, let me answer that second question first, because it's absolutely obvious, unless you're an absolute idiot. The data center that is being built in Utah, the one that you're talking about, is not an NSA data center. So the reason why a private company would have it is completely different than why the NSA has it. So yeah, that would be a reason. That's the first one. I hope you understand that. Secondly, the 63 square miles thing, that is the total length of the property of all the things that are included in this project, including the housing for the construction workers, and again, a lot of land that is just going to be set aside for cows to graze on. Like, it's not going to actually be developed. It's a significantly smaller blueprint on that particular property that is going to actually have the physical data center, which should be obvious to everybody, but then again, we're dealing with sloppulous idiots who may or may not be being paid in order to say this dumbass shit on the internet.com in order to scare you into, again, helping a foreign power pass us economically. That would be the Chinese, based on the fact that they're promoting this level of ignorance. And again, another thing that a little bit of Googling, a basic amount of research would have cleared up for Isabella right here would have been the issue of energy consumption.
And by the way, it's going to be using up double the electricity that Utah uses currently.
So look, there are current data centers right now that are being built that are hooked up to the regular ordinary grid, and while they do have backup generators, their primary source of power is where we get power, and this, because of supply and demand, could result in higher electricity bills for all of us, because again, we're all having demand from the same portion of the grid. But you know what is not really going to be facing this problem? This Utah data center, as it is building out its own energy infrastructure, it's going to tap a natural gas pipeline and fuel its own power. There's also going to be on-site battery storage to capture excess power, so that way, again, they don't have to hook this one up to the grid. And as for the water issue, it actually is going to use 75% less water than the farm that they bought in order to build this, because the farm owned those water rights, and farming is very water intensive, which we'll get into a little bit later. And by the way, a lot of these data centers that end up building out their power infrastructure actually end up sending the excess power back into the grid, thus possibly lowering energy bills, which is one of the reasons why, by the way, a lot of politicians are actually supporting building these, because it's requiring these companies to build out their own energy infrastructure, and when they have that energy infrastructure, they're going to feed back the excess into the grid. So yeah, to answer her question from the beginning about whether or not this could help you in like the short term, in the most basic sense, increasing electricity generation absolutely will. And by the way, one of the things that people have been taking note of is the fact that a lot of these companies are reopening or actually proposing the creation of new nuclear plants and extending current nuclear power plants, thus actually increasing the amount of energy produced in the United States of America, which of course will lead to jobs in the construction of that energy infrastructure, jobs related to the maintenance of that energy infrastructure, and of course, innovations related to energy, as these companies are for-profit companies and they want to produce the most amount of energy the cheapest way possible to do so. But yeah, we're gonna say the power talking points for more perfect union and pretend to be right-wing, as again we talk about how, oh, we don't need this in the United States of America, we don't need this in Utah at all whatsoever, let us just kick this over to the Chinese and see how it works out when they advance in this crucial technology going forward.
Why does Utah need a 63 square mile data center? And by the way, it's going to be using up double the electricity that Utah uses currently. And honestly, why does the country need anything like that, for that matter? So I'm asking you to just ask yourself if this is really for the betterment of society and storing family photos and for you, or is it for mass surveillance?
So a lot of these populist idiot content creators who have clearly never read a book in their entire lives are basically indistinguishable from the communists. She is basically on the same track as a Bernie Sanders, an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Elizabeth Warren, who, by the way, are very consistently wrong about absolutely everything. And again, the arrogance, the hubris for you to say, well, I need to be able to decide what other people can invest in and do with their own money because I'm a dumb blonde that is sitting in my car giving this stupid ass rant that may or may not be paid by a foreign influence campaign that I'm too dumb or unprincipled to be able to detect. And by the way, she brings up the family photos. And do you really think it's about the family photos? Obviously, you understand why a 20-year-old is obsessed with photos, her own personal image over absolutely everything. But I will remind you that nowhere was it ever argued at any moment, at any point, that the point of these data centers were related to storing this girl's Instagram photos. Please, for the love of God, get better in your argumentation, because in reality, I want you guys to understand there are some issues with data centers. There are some issues with water usage. There are some issues with energy usage, but these issues are nowhere near to the scale that the hysterics are claiming that they are. And by the way, a lot of these issues are actually going to be improved by these data centers, the very ones that they claim are going to be made worse by them. And I will explain both of those to you right now. But first, here's a post that you might have seen on social media that again is being reposted by a bunch of third worldist slop accounts that exist to undermine the United States of America. That's what their whole social media history is, making the claim that this is the drain on the Colorado River due to these data centers. So obviously the community note indicates that that's not even the Colorado River, but in addition to that, most of the water that is being drained away from the Colorado River, again, orders of magnitude higher than the issue related to data centers, is actually going to growing high water content crops like almonds in California, where you probably shouldn't be growing almonds in the first place. And in addition to that, the water that is going to these farmers to grow these crops that again consume way more water than any of these data centers is being subsidized, so the price is artificially low. So of course these farmers are consuming way more of it than they would if they actually had to pay market prices. And remember the issue of you having to pay more because somebody is consuming way more. Well, that consumption being subsidized means that you pay more for water if you're getting your water from the Colorado River than you otherwise would have. And again, this is somehow being pinned on data centers with these slop images that are being circulated by these third worldist accounts, even though again, the images aren't the river. There is no data center that is drawing anywhere near close to this, not even 1% of the water that almonds take up, but this is being thrown out there because they don't want us to actually save our water or anything of the sort. They're pushing a hysteria meant to undermine our economy. And again, the power issue is also something that I talked about earlier on, but I will add again, which is the fact that we have a degrading power infrastructure that is not updated. And because of this, and because of the demands of energy of these data centers, these people, these private companies, they're actually paying for new energy infrastructure. They're building it out. They're fixing problems of degradation of our grid due to the fact that they need it, not at the taxpayer expense, not at the utility expense. And yes, that benefits us all, and it increases energy generation, which of course will lower prices. Supply and demand, basic economics. I know it's not as fun as this particular hysteria, but yeah, obviously this is actually going to improve in a lot of cases. And the examples of them saying, oh, it doesn't really improve, it actually hurts, are areas that have energy prices going up due to mostly left-wing energy policy, not due to data centers. Because if you look at a chart on energy increases in the nation, what you end up finding out is that it's not the states with the most data centers that actually are seeing the highest rise in electricity bills. And in fact, adjusted for inflation, places like Texas that are building a whole mess of these things actually have stable to decreasing energy prices, because guess what? They allow you to build out energy infrastructure there without any issue. And the places that have the highest increase in energy prices, California, New York, Massachusetts, all these different places that pass these regional climate or statewide climate goals that hamstring energy production that have nothing to do with data centers. I mean, right now you have refineries shutting down in the state of California because you have the environmentalists that are blocking pipeline infrastructure to prevent oil from getting to said refineries. That's causing them to have to bring in energy by boat from other states. And obviously that is leading to dramatically high energy prices, and none of that, absolutely none of that, has anything to do with, guess what? Data centers. And by the way, while there's definitely a foreign influence component to the opposition and hysteria to these data centers, make no mistake about it, some of the other support for this is to cover up and shift blame from piss poor energy policies, piss poor infrastructure policies that date back decades that they're trying to throw onto this new boogeyman, which of course is the data center. So again, listen people, I don't mean for you to just just support big tech blindly or whatever, but understand who's benefiting from this opposition, understand how hysterical it is, understand that we've seen these campaigns before. Again, anytime there's something new, there's some boom that is actually going to benefit huge portions of the American population, these kind of hysterics end up being deployed. And another perfect example of this is that after hydraulic fracking ended up becoming less expensive, thus making natural gas, which is very abundant in the United States of America, easier to get, we had the movie Gasland, which very iconically featured people lighting their water on fire, which they attributed to hydraulic fracking in the movie. But in reality, what we found out is that water table actually had methane in it naturally going back decades, and this was a well-known phenomenon in the particular region that we're talking about. So of course, that image that was so iconic about what could happen if we actually tapped our own energy resources was used to forward terrible policy, even though it wasn't based in reality. And you're seeing the same things with these data centers where they'll end up building on farmland, and then people will test the water runoff from these data centers, say that there's chemicals in it like benzene, even though the data centers don't produce that. And those chemicals were actually from the farmland. Prior to this, they contaminated this. The data centers not using those fertilizers will actually make it better over time, and yet they're trying to pin it on them because they're trying to throw anything at these to see what sticks, because the United States of America is in a wonderful position to take advantage of the AI revolution and forward ourselves into the future as the #1 economy and the enemies of the United States of America, both from without and from within. And by the way, these stupid people who don't realize they're enemies of this nation are also getting on board with it. So again, just think about what you're being told, think about what you're being spoon-fed, and think about how a new environmentalist movement has seemingly cropped up overnight with unlimited funding in order to oppose these things. Think about the fact that they're deploying all the same regular old NIMBY tactics that they use against nuclear power and natural gas, and realize what's actually going down. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, show by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias. This has been me talking about the data center hysteria. Till next time.